Everyone in town knew David Blake. He was the kind of man people pointed to and said, "That's a good man." A firefighter for over 30 years, David had pulled children out of burning homes, rescued pets from flooded basements, and even once ran into a collapsing warehouse to save a stranger. His face was on the department's annual calendar, and he received the town's Medal of Honor twice. He was brave, humble, and steady. At least that's what everyone believed. His son Jeremy believed it too. From the time he could walk, Jeremy saw his father as larger than life. He'd sit in the fire truck after school, pretend to drive while wearing his dad's helmet, and listen wide-eyed to every story about blazing rooftops and daring saves. To Jeremy, his dad wasn't just a hero. He was the hero. But like many men who wear their armor too tight, David didn't speak much about the past. He was kind, yes, but distant. He worked long hours, and when he came home, he barely spoke unless it was about chores, grades, or his schedule. He never yelled. He never hugged either. Jeremy couldn't remember a time when his dad said, "I love you." But that didn't matter much when he was younger. The pride he felt in his father's reputation filled in the blanks his heart didn't understand. Jeremy's mother, Angela, was the one who made the house feel like home. She was the soft place he landed, the one who brought peace to a life built around the unpredictable hours of a firefighter. When she passed away from cancer during Jeremy's freshman year of college, it was like the only warmth left in his world had gone cold. And David, as always, didn't talk about it. Not once. He just kept working, kept showing up at the firehouse, kept moving forward. Jeremy, now an only child with no other family, had no choice but to do the same. Years passed. Jeremy graduated, became a teacher, and eventually started a family of his own. He and his father stayed in touch, but their conversations remained surface level. Holidays were polite but stiff. Birthdays were marked with a card and a brief phone call. Even when Jeremy had children, David's grandchildren, he remained emotionally distant, showing up to birthday parties with wrapped gifts but rarely staying long. Still, Jeremy respected him, loved him even. He figured that some men just didn't know how to show affection, especially those who saw death more than most people see daylight. He accepted the quiet. He accepted the distance. He never asked questions. Then one September morning, the call came. David had collapsed while jogging, a heart attack. By the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. Jeremy stood in the hospital hallway, stunned, not just because his father was gone, but because of how it happened, alone, no warning, no goodbye. Planning the funeral felt surreal. The town rallied, of course. Stories flooded in from strangers who had been saved, helped, or inspired by David Blake. A statue was even proposed for the firehouse lawn. Jeremy watched it all like he was outside his own body, trying to grieve a man he knew, but maybe never truly understood. Then came the reading of the will. Jeremy expected it to be simple. His father wasn't wealthy, a modest house, a pension, and some savings. Nothing extravagant. The lawyer, a man Jeremy had never met, looked uncomfortable as he opened the envelope. He read slowly. The house, savings, and most of David's belongings were not being left to Jeremy. They were being left to someone named Eleanor Green. Jeremy blinked. Who? The lawyer hesitated. Eleanor Green. Your father noted that she was his longtime friend and supporter. Jeremy felt the floor shift. Supporter? Friend? I've never heard of her. There was more. His father had a second safety deposit box filled with letters, photos, and journals. Jeremy had the right to open it, but the lawyer warned, some of what you'll find may come as a surprise. Jeremy left the office in silence, his mind racing. For the first time in his life, he felt like a stranger to his own father. That night, unable to sleep, he went to the bank and opened the deposit box. Inside was a small stack of handwritten letters, all addressed to the same woman, Eleanor. Along with them were photographs, some recent, some decades old. In many of them, David was smiling in ways Jeremy had never seen, laughing, holding hands with a woman who clearly wasn't his mother. Jeremy felt anger rising. Had his father been unfaithful? Is that why he'd been so distant all those years? Had his childhood been a lie? He read the letters slowly, hands trembling. The first one was dated just a few months after Jeremy's mother passed. David wrote about grief, loneliness, and confusion. He described long nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd made the right choices as a husband and father. Then came the next one, and the next, and the story began to unfold. Eleanor wasn't a secret lover. She was a counselor, a grief therapist who had helped David privately after Angela's death. They had met by chance when David responded to a small house fire at her home. Nothing serious, just a kitchen mishap. But David noticed her bookshelf filled with books about grief and trauma, and something compelled him to reach out. They met weekly for years, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence. Over time, their professional relationship became a friendship. And yes, there was affection, deep, respectful affection, but not romance. David had kept this part of his life hidden, not out of shame, but because he didn't know how to explain it. He didn't know how to talk about emotions. Never had. He'd grown up with a father who drank, a mother who was silent, and a belief that strength meant never crying. But in those letters, he admitted something Jeremy had never heard him say aloud. I didn't know how to love my son the way he needed me to. I thought being strong meant being silent. But silence leaves a boy wondering if he's worthy of love. I wish I could tell him now. I was proud of him every single day. I just didn't know how to say it. Jeremy broke down, right there in the small, cold room at the bank. Tears poured from his eyes, grief mixing with understanding, pain blending with compassion. He read every letter, every journal page, and when he was done, he called Eleanor. She answered kindly, and when he introduced himself, there was a pause, then a quiet, "I've been waiting for your call." They met the next day at a quiet park. She was in her 60s, graceful, warm, and open-hearted. She brought more letters, ones his father had written but never mailed. And she shared something else too, a folder of drawings. Jeremy flipped through them, stunned. Sketches of fire trucks, of Jeremy as a little boy, of birthdays David had missed but remembered in ink, of moments he had never been able to say out loud. "Your father loved you more than anything," Eleanor said, "but he thought he didn't deserve your love in return. He carried guilt like armor." Jeremy felt something shift inside. Years of confusion, of wondering why his father kept him at arm's length, began to make sense. Not because it was okay, but because it was human. David Blake had been a hero, not just in the fires, but in the quiet battle of learning how to heal, even if he never figured out how to say it aloud. A month later, Jeremy stood at the unveiling of the statue in front of the firehouse. He held a framed photo of his father and smiled. But this time, the smile was different. Not painted by pride, but brushed by truth. "I used to think my father was perfect," Jeremy said to the crowd. "Then I found out he wasn't, and somehow I love him more now because of it." He paused, voice shaking. "He taught me that being a hero doesn't mean never falling. It means choosing to get up, to learn, and to love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." After the ceremony, Jeremy took his children to the park. They laughed, played, and shared ice cream. And when the sun began to set, he looked at his daughter and said, "I love you." She smiled and said it back. The cycle was breaking, one word at a time. Some truths come late, but even when they arrive after loss, they can still bring healing. Jeremy's story reminds us that understanding someone's silence often takes patience, and that love can be buried beneath years of fear, waiting to be found. Even if someone never says the words, their love might still be speaking in the quiet things.